Welcome to the Decent People Podcast, a production of Decentral Media, where we're committed to telling the stories of the founders, builders, and visionaries who are creating a new decentralized economy and internet experience. You guys know it as Web3 or blockchain, but we're going to bring you the smartest and most interesting people in the space for intimate conversations that reveal their background, how they got into crypto in the first place, and what they're doing today to make a decentralized future a reality. Thanks so much for joining us, and check out our site at decentral.io. Now to the show. Hi, and welcome to the latest edition of the Decent People Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Leising, and we've got a guest on today that I've been waiting for a couple weeks to speak to. I'm very excited about. It's Ryan Breslow. He is the co-founder of Bolt and a new project in the crypto world called LoveDAO. Bolt, as you might have heard, is competing with Amazon and some other payment services to enable one-click payments at checkout, both I think at retailers and online. And LoveDAO is a crowdsourced DAO that is going to try to upend the way that pharmaceutical research is done. So I'm really excited to talk to Ryan about that. But first, welcome, Ryan. How are you today?
Matt, I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be on here, and no complaints.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I did a bit of research on you. It's pretty easy. You guys, the listeners out there, might have read the story in Forbes on Ryan earlier this month. Bolt has had a valuation somewhere upwards of about $11 billion, making Ryan one of the younger billionaires out there in the tech world. And so as I was doing my research, I loved coming across this part where you grew up in North Miami, if I'm correct, and then your parents had a golf course, and you worked at the golf course, and one of your jobs was shagging balls out of there was a water, I guess, a water trap, or like the guys at the driving range would hit into water, and then one of your jobs was to shag the balls. Is that right?
Yeah. So my dad actually has a local standalone golf driving range where you hit balls into this lake. It's kind of a throwback business that's been there forever, for decades. And so I was always like cleaning people's clubs, going on this small boat and fishing balls out. The balls would float on the water.
I love that story because that was one of the first jobs I had at a golf course near my house in LA. I was the guy that drove the little cart, so this was all on grass, and then you drive the little cart and you pick up the balls, and then, you kind of recycle them to the driving range.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So what's up. And it gets nice and hot out there, especially in South Florida during the summer.
LA too. In the summer, it was brutal. And I wanted to ask if anybody ever tried to hit you while you were getting balls.
People would do that. My dad would tell them to stop doing that. And you'd wear a helmet.
Really?
When you went out there, yeah. So just a little extra precaution.
Yeah.
You want to get hit in the head with a golf ball.
So I'm in this little cart, and it's got a cage around it, of course. But man, I would go close to to where the tees were, and they would just nail me. I remember I can still hear the sound of the balls hitting that cage.
Oh my God.
So tell me a little bit more about your childhood. Do you have brothers and sisters? And like you said, your dad had a standalone driving range down there. And what else did they do?
That was my dad. He worked very hard as a small business owner. My mom worked, secretarial type roles at different small businesses. So grew up very middle class. Have a younger sister as well. Went to, public school, went to, some large overcrowded public schools where most of the, I was middle class. Most of the population was below the poverty line, over 50% at my high school. So grew up in a, very diverse environment. Not, necessarily, I was always building websites and stuff at home, but didn't necessarily grow up in tech. As many of my friends, I was lucky enough to get into Stanford. And I went there, and, a lot of kids grew up VCs as parents or big tech executives as parents. And it was all brand new to me. I mean, I had no clue I didn't know what a startup was. I couldn't
Yeah.
define that word when I had
Yeah.
gotten. So
You mentioned about working at the golf course. Did you and your sister kind of like work at your dad's businesses as you were growing up? Was that like just kind of part of the family life?
we did, yeah. So I would, run the shop and run the range. When my dad needed time off, my sister would as well. And I worked a lot when I was a kid. I mean, I had a job as a bag boy at Publix
Yeah.
since I was 14, where I was making minimum wage there. And my parents really, while they didn't have the big, tech jobs uh, to teach me about that world, they did teach me the value of having work ethic and discipline and putting in the time. So I was working a lot of my childhood. Um, my two grandfathers also had started small businesses um, that ended up kind of not having the best exits, but had some good runs, and ended up making some bad decisions, and
Yeah.
you know losing most of their money. So while we didn't reap the financial reward of those businesses as a family, I saw a lot of mistakes that people could make, and was just very exposed to small business growing up.
Yeah. That's got to be valuable, right? I mean, on the one
Yeah,
hand, success is great, but on the other hand, what is it? 8 or 9 out of 10 small businesses don't make it, right? So it's important to kind of know the pitfalls and try to avoid them when you're launching your own thing.
yeah, it's really tough. I mean, running a small business is really tough. It's as you said, so many fail, and unlike venture capital, a lot of times people are putting their own money and livelihoods on the line.
Yeah.
So when they fail, they're in a it takes their whole life and potentially their family down with them.
So you mentioned the bag boy stint at Publix. I loved looking at your resume on LinkedIn, and you've got a lot of cool jobs. Obviously Bolt and Love Dow. You're the founder and a dance instructor for the movement, and then at the very bottom, it's bag boy at Publix. And that made me smile because my wife's from Florida, and her family all grew up in Jacksonville. So the boys were the bag boys and the girls were the cashiers, as you probably well know. And I wondered if it was still like that with the sexes kind of segregated when you were there.
It's a good question. I mean, there are definitely more males bagging and more. Uh, there are definitely more gals,
In the
cashing,
cashier. Yeah.
being the cashier. Um, I mean, it wasn't 100% each way. It was, there was definitely diversity. I mean, so I don't think it's a knock on the the grocery store necessarily, but
No,
yeah,
no, I'm not
you're
saying it
totally
like
right.
that. I just always thought that was, kind of funny and a little archaic.
Yeah.
And what do you think you learned there, like working at Publix and bagging groceries? What was that like?
Well, you have to stand there and um, engage with all walks of life. There's so many different types of people that come through a grocery store, especially when you're at a Publix and not a Whole Foods, right? I mean, you're kind of at a baseline grocer.
Yeah, exactly. For people who don't know Florida or the South, like it's not necessarily high end. It's not low end, but it's kind of like middle to low end kind of grocery store, basic stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And a great business, a great grocer. They treat their employees really well. Have a lot of respect for the company. But yeah, all walks of life come in, and so you're taught to deal with everyone as a human being. You can't avoid anybody. You have to give them a good service. Give them good service, engage with them, say hello, be positive, help them with their needs. Um, People will surprise you with the amount of diverse things they might ask you, whether it's to run products back that they don't want to purchase anymore, or certain things break, or they want you to go grab things. And you kind of have to deal with just this wide swath of people, emotions, situations, and one after the next, right? It's like a new person every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes. And I'm very fortunate for that experience because Afterwards, starting these next businesses, it was much less diversity. Right, Stanford was much less diversity. There it was just like a human was a human, and you interacted with everybody.
Yeah. I'm out in LA and I shop at Ralph's a lot. And I think this started in the pandemic where they just really didn't have anybody bagging groceries. You had to do it yourself. And then they've kind of kept that going now that we're back to normal. And I would like kill for a bag boy because I'm really sick of bagging my own stuff.
Yeah, and we make good tips.
Did you
I
get
would,
tipped?
I did,
You,
yeah.
you like take stuff out to somebody's car for them or something like that?
Would always offer to take your bags out. 80% of the people would tip you if you took their bags out. 20% would stiff you and just say thank you. And you just had to, smile and wave anyway.
Yeah.
So
What were you doing in high school, like academically, or did you play sports? Like, what was your high school life like at that time when you were bagging groceries?
well, given my dad's business, I was captain of the golf team. Um, and then I tried the opposite end of the spectrum, so I was on the wrestling team. Um, and which I loved as well. And I I worked really hard academically because I didn't see too much of a future for myself in South Florida. Now Miami's different. Back then, it was, there's not a ton of opportunity. You get into real estate or tourism, but like I wanted to kind of get out to Silicon Valley or to New York or something like that. So I'm like, I got to get into a good school. So I worked really hard academically. Um, was kind of top of my class, great scores, took a ton. Just made sure that I was uh, put everything I had on the table to get into a good school.
Was Stanford always the goal? Was it like because it was so close to Silicon Valley, or what could have been in Cal, or could have been other places, or was it like that was it? I want to go to Stanford.
I didn't think I would get into Stanford because the acceptance rates for out of California students are just so low that uh, I kind of wrote it off. Um, I really wanted to get into Ivy League schools. I got into a couple that I didn't were my first choice. I got rejected for some of my first choices. Um, and Stanford ended up being the last school I heard from, very last one out of maybe a dozen I applied to, and was just shocked when I got in. And what was interesting was that I think they're the only school where the admitter writes you a little note on why you got in.
Oh, really?
And it wasn't my sports, it wasn't my grades. I mean, I'm sure that had a factor. It wasn't my extracurriculars. I did a bunch of community service and stuff like that. It was, I think, on their application, others I didn't write about as much, but theirs had some questions that led me to write about my businesses. And I'd started all these different online businesses in high school, and they were just like, "That's super cool. That's super unique. Those businesses that you started." So that stood out to us, and that's why you got in.
I never got that because I applied to Stanford and didn't get in. So good for you. Were you into crypto at this point yet, or like this is right around kind of when the Bitcoin white paper was coming out? Were you in the same kind of time zone there?
Exactly. I got into school 2012, so kind of not too far after the white paper. When I started, I didn't know about Bitcoin, but I ended up taking this class called Startup Engineering, started by Balaji Srinivasan, um, from Council and Coinbase and Andreessen. This was before his stint before 21, before Andreessen, before Coinbase. And he was telling the class about Bitcoin. And he'd host these hackathons like twice a week. And he would stay up all night for people who wanted to hack and code. So there were roughly 8 of us who'd stay up do all-nighters with him. Would be there till like 6 in the morning. And we'd talk about Bitcoin, and he was just a wealth of knowledge. And he would just lecture to us, like privately, like teach us about all these things that he had learned. And so the 8 of us plus him and another professor, Vijay Pandey, started the Stanford Bitcoin Group
Oh, really?
in early 2013. Um,
God, what a great mentor for you to have. I'm sure there are like millions of people who would kill to have that kind of access and one-on-one mentorship from him.
yeah, I mean, it's so lucky, right, to have, you know, he's a genius, right? Those Vijay and Balaji are genius level, and to have that such a close proximity to him.
What kind of like lured you in or hooked you on Bitcoin? What part of it? Because there's a lot of different things. A lot of people, take to it for different reasons. What was it for you?
For me, it was, I've been very passionate about economics, money, how it shapes society. I ran a philosophy club at Stanford, um, where we talked a lot about societal issues, and I generally become disillusioned with the financial system. And Bitcoin was the first thing that I had awareness of that presented an alternative.
So you would have been in the financial crisis. You would have been right in high school then, right? So you were probably aware and willing, and I mean, able to kind of understand what was going on in the broader economy and around the world, right?
Exactly, right? I saw that firsthand in high school. I was reading a lot about it. Um, and yeah, it was great timing right as I entered college to be exposed to blockchain and Bitcoin. I'm like, this could really be an answer, or at least a plan B, for society in case those who govern our financial systems uh, don't end up succeeding or can't address all of society. Could this present a second route for people to still be able to transact and function? So I'm like, this could change the world. And the technology was incredible, right? It's like, who designed this? It's unbelievable. So it was just, I was enthralled and, obsessed.
And that has sort of the seeds of Bolt in it, right? Is that where you sort of kind of kept going on and into the payments sort of space and originally thought you could create something where Bitcoin was the payment rail?
That's exactly right. So I wanted to make it easy for people to use Bitcoin. We're starting to build a hosted wallet that made you easy to send and purchase an on-ramp to Bitcoin. Um, and in doing so, I learned a lot about risk and on-ramping and payments. And I was like, we got to be able to send this money, send Bitcoin to someone and know who they are without in a low friction way, but where they could run off with the cash. How do you secure fraud against a credit card payment? How do you make the user experience easy? And and I was like, wait a second. Doesn't everyone deal with this? Like, what company is working on user experience tied with security for any checkout? And so after a while of working on this for crypto, I was just like, wow, we should build a general purpose checkout that bridges user experience with security.
Mm-hmm.
That became the modern day now vision for Bolt.
That was, yeah, where Bolt came from. Um, and was it also a factor? I mean, back then, I think as you meant, like you were alluding to, the infrastructure around Bitcoin was pretty minimal, right? It was like kind of like you had to build it yourself, especially if we're talking 2013. Coinbase had maybe just gotten off the ground, but you might have to be going to Mount Gox, and we all know what happened there. And so was that also a kind of like it was just like, God, this is great technology, but there's just nothing supporting it.
That's exactly right. Mount Gox, Trade Hill days, like it was really early days. Um, and also we had to get banks to work with us. So I spent a year of my life flying around the country, talking with bank executives and compliance teams. I created a spreadsheet of like 10,000 banks, and I reached out to everyone that would talk to me, and I was trying to convince them to work with us. So I was educating bankers on Bitcoin all day. The tech was super hard and janky. And we're starting to make some progress, and we got some banks to work with us. And we had multi-hundred-page compliance programs, and just it was a slog. And so when I came up with the idea for general purpose checkout, it was kind of like, whew, like I don't, I'm going to take a break from crypto for a while. We'll come back to it later once it's a little more established.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing now with Bolt, is we're starting to reintroduce crypto into our checkout.
Now, as you built Bolt up into, a multi-billion-dollar valuation company, you've made some waves by, kind of taking some swings at folks in Silicon Valley and some in the, kind of like VC world. Do you feel like that's coming back from like your background about sort of, being working, middle class, having jobs as a kid, working publics? And is that, and then, you kind of get into the Stanford world where, like you mentioned, it's the sons and daughters of CEOs and people who are running corporations. Is that, do you think you're carrying that kind of with you through your adolescence?
Maybe. I mean, it's definitely your background defines who you are, right? So that background definitely has a part to play. Um, and yeah, I'm generally, I'm excited. I'm very pro builder, right? Like, I work with a lot of builders. I've been mentoring, advising founders since day one. And there's nothing that pains me more uh, than folks who get on a cap table or say you need me and then end up causing issues with the company or not making decisions that are pro founder. So I wanted to speak up about the problems that I saw, not in a sense of I'm right or they're wrong, but just these are things that should be said to help balance the discussion, right? That I think others were afraid to say. So for me, I just saw it as, hey, if anyone's going to say something, I might as well. And you know, I uh, I welcome and hope for anyone I spoke up regarding to take that to heart and change and be better for builders and nothing against them in the long term.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I support a lot of that because I do also share your frustration with some VCs that, that they've got a checkbook and that's about all they've got. They might be guiding you in certain ways, but it's the hard work of the folks that, are getting that money that's really the important part. And that's where all this stuff comes from. It doesn't come from somebody in a VC fund just giving money away. Um, and I love like reading through your Twitter feed, and there was one that stood out to me. You just tweeted, "Intellectuals kill companies," and I just wanted to ask you for a little bit of context or background on that one. And is that kind of part of like your daily thinking about stuff, or how does that like work into what you're doing?
I had seen through the experience of now building multiple companies, complex thinking cause significant delays and almost kill companies. And so I think if you can't explain what you're doing very simply, you're not focused. And I had made personally the mistake of hiring people who were very smart but didn't value simplicity, right? They would value talking forever and writing extremely long things. And if you can't translate your intelligence into a simple plan, then you're of no use to an organization. And you might actually create more confusion and harm than good. And the worst thing is, some of these people end up thinking they're helping the organization and, they're so smart and they're pointing out all of these things. Um, and so I don't necessarily value intellectualism in my companies. I want to work with smart people, but I want to work with people who understand business impact and how to tie their intelligence to business impact and how to get focus out of their team and those around us and how to drive alignment and harmony with those around them, not more confusion.
Does that tie into what you've called work theater? Sort of like this idea that people are just need to look like they're working, and when they're actually not really doing anything.
Yes, that's exactly right. Um, it's easy to get lost in, an owner of a business has to deliver, right? If you say to your investors, here are my goals, I'm going to report on these goals,
Yeah.
they are held against the fire to deliver impact. Others, understandably, are more distant from that accountability. And so, my job as a manager is to hold people accountable. And the managers that work for me, their job is to hold people accountable to things that matter as well. And so, one of the things I coach all my companies on is eliminating work theater, right? Making sure the people who are working for you know that results and impact are what matter, not looking good in their work. And they can even be a little bit messy in their work. If they're delivering results, it matters way more than how they appear to be working.
Yeah, that resonated with me because I worked for many years at Bloomberg News in New York, and it's a pretty intense culture there. And this work theater idea, I think, manifested it itself where people wouldn't leave their desks. Like they would stay until 6:30 or 7 o'clock. They're not really doing anything, but they just want to be seen at their desk as though they're doing stuff. And I was like, that always drove me crazy. I'm like, just get your job done, do a good job, and go home. Go have fun, do something else.
100%. And I had some of my best people doing that, right? And then they'd come to me in 6 months and say they're burnt out. And I was like, well, I didn't want you to be at your desk until 8 p.m. every night. I didn't ask you to do that. Like, you're delivering great results, but there's a way to do that without being at your desk till 8 p.m. every night. And here are some other people. I'd point to some examples where they leave at 5 or 6, but they're getting just as much done, right? And they call it, they're offline, they'll answer if it's important, but I care about the impact, not the appearance, right? I don't need to see that you're slaving for me to like you,
Yeah.
right? And actually, we started Conscious Culture, which was how to bridge execution with humanity, and so we stopped praising hard work. Um, you know, if you can get the same amount of work done in less time, so you can go have fun with your family, then great. And if you're having impact in a sustainable way, that's actually best for the organization because you can be with us for the long term, and you're demonstrating that that is possible, that health is possible to all of your peers.
Is the 4-day work week that you guys have instituted a part of that?
Yes,
And are you
it
doing that
is.
across all your companies, or is that just a Bolt, or where is that taking effect?
That's just a bolt for now, but these are things that are all on the table for all the other companies at the right time.
Okay, so now back to crypto, and like you're doing Bolt, and kind of you've pivoted to like just payments in general, and competing, with the Amazon buy now button and all that stuff. When did so Ethereum kind of came into the conversation around 2015, 2016 for sure. Is that where, or when did you sort of come into Ethereum? Because we're going to get into that obviously when you're creating a DAO. That's all Ethereum based. But I was just curious when you came across Ethereum for the first time and what your kind of initial reaction to it was.
I obviously heard about Ethereum quite early on. I think that as time has gone, I became more bullish on Ethereum. I originally thought Bitcoin was the answer and consider myself more of a Bitcoin maximalist. I have recently, over the last few years, had my eyes really open into the power of dApps and DAOs. I think they're still extremely nascent, but I think they're going to change the world. And it's just a matter of time. And so, obviously, with what I'm doing with Love, I'm a firm believer in Ethereum's importance and the roles that dApps and DAOs are going to play in the future.
Yeah, so let's talk about Love, and where did it come from? Like, I know a lot of people who found healthcare companies or pharmaceutical companies have a personal reason, a lot of times, like something that they, like a family member or themselves or something that is kind of driving them to do this sort of thing and take it's an incredibly intense and expensive and long and painstaking process to do drug development. Do you have a personal connection here with any of that, or how do you come at it from yourself personally?
I've had some very personal experiences with health, including family members, cancer runs in my family, heart issues run in my family, um, certain other diseases like Crohn's disease and others also run in my family. So um, yeah, I've been through the ringer. My mom is a multi-time cancer survivor. My dad has had substantial amounts of health issues that he's really struggled with. He's recently lost most of his vision and is now legally blind. Um, Many other members of my family have had cancer. The list goes on. Myself, I have an autoimmune disease, and then I also had chronic back pain during early days of Bolt. At the age of 22, which I thought was muscular or spinal, and I ended up learning through alternative therapists that it was stress related. And this is one of the biggest light bulb moments for me personally. Was I had such serious back issues, such a young age, and I'm like, what's going on? I did wrestling, I did gymnastics when I was a kid. I'm like, did I mess something up when I was young doing those things? I was going to spine specialist, back specialist, physical therapist. And I finally went to a person, I can't even describe what they are, like a healer, like a spiritual healer, as a last resort that someone referred me to. And they told me that it was all stress related.
Oh, you were
And
carrying it in your back, basically,
in
kind of
my
that's what
back,
was manifesting.
it was manifesting in my back. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't dance, which I loved, and I couldn't work out. It was ruining my life. And when they said that, I really heard it. And I was like, whoa, I'm pretty sure you're right.
Yeah.
And I've started to work on stress and calming down, which is now a huge part of my life, yoga and meditation, particularly. And within a few months, the back pain eventually completely went away
Wow.
and hasn't returned to this date. And my back is works like it's brand new.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, through that journey, I had met many other friends who are suffering with back issues and some were 12 surgeries in.
Wow.
Because, once you have something, these other people, you start to know others who have it. And I'm like, what if theirs was also just related to their mental state? Right? Do they really need these surgeries? I wouldn't want to broach that topic with them because, they're on their own journey, but, and they have the reasons for doing surgery or whatever. But I'm like, how many diagnoses are leading people to severe surgical or chemical paths that could have been prevented with breathing a little more and getting better sleep and doing some yoga.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, like, it sounds like, because I've had a journey through medicine in ways that I never thought I would. My wife got ALS a few years ago and passed away in 2020.
Wow, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And like our journey through the doctors and all the testing and the things that weren't found, or I came away so disillusioned with modern medicine and the way that I think with ALS it's a tough one because we have no idea what causes it, so it's very difficult to treat, and it's terminal. But at the same time, I felt like a lot of times my wife was just there to be, poked and prodded, and like, now how bad are you this month, and so it really kind of turned me away from medicine and modern medicine especially, and it sounds like you kind of had a little bit of that same experience, and maybe with your family and things, and going through cancer and other things. Is that sort of also been driving you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I've had this many issues within my own family, a middle class family, like not rich but not poor, how how are others dealing with this? Like, how are those beneath the poverty line dealing with this? Um, and everywhere I turn now that I'm kind of started to talk about people entering a space, everybody I meet has a crazy health story. And then I started looking at the numbers. 60% of Americans have a chronic illness.
Yeah, it's amazing.
30% of Americans, so 50% of that 60%, have two or more.
Wow.
Everyone's dealing with health issues and going on a journey. And Western medicine can work wonders. There's no doubt. I hear the Western medicine miracle stories as well. But it's not the only path. It's one of many different paths. And my hope at Love is to expose the other paths.
Yeah, it strikes me that the parallel here is with like the financial world and then crypto, right? Crypto is not looking to replace Wall Street or the dollar, but it's an alternative. It's an alternative system for people who want to use it. And
Exactly.
sounds like what you're doing with Love. So, was there an aha moment for Love DAO, and or was it just a slowly building process where you finally like it crystallized for you, or how did you like? What was the spark to start this?
I was brainstorming with some friends, on how we can solve this health crisis. Um, One of the things that I enjoy doing is talking about the world's problems. Like, if my pastime is spent doing that. So a lot of the companies that I've started have kind of spawned from those conversations. And not that I have the hubris to think that I can, but I do have enough determination to think that I can make a dent, or at least have the obligation to try. And we came up with this concept of an alternative medicine marketplace. Doesn't really exist today. They're independent companies that have their own marketing, but there's no Amazon like destination um, for alternative medicine. So obviously, it's going to be far different than Amazon because it's about healing and quality. But there's no marketplace destination. So that was one concept. And then the other concept just started to manifest around my background in crypto, and I've done a lot of work with DAOs. I started a DAO recently called the Peace DAO, which had tremendous impact in doing work in Ukraine and
Okay, cool.
Poland. And I saw how a DAO could be used to have impact and make a dollar go a really long way. I'm like, why can't we apply it here?
Let's explain that a little more for listeners who maybe aren't super familiar with it. But a DAO is it's basically a collective of people, and it's meant to be sort of horizontal in leadership, and then decentralized, as the name. It's a decentralized autonomous organization, which is, I hate that term. I think it's like a terrible term that coders came up with. But it basically like kind of it's not like it's like crowdsourcing, but it's not like crowdsourcing at the same time. So people gather around a common idea, like Love DAO, where you want to um, investigate and fund research into alternative therapies for diseases or for mental health. And so then everyone will kind of come and collect around that and work on different parts of that problem. Am I getting that right, Ryan, in your experience?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a collective of people that gets things done, with a little bit more sophistication and tooling than a Reddit group or a Facebook group, which is where a lot of chronic sufferers or health interest groups live. Here on a DAO, you can pull funds together. You could elect officials to perform certain functions for the group. You can also propose projects to fund. You can fund the projects with reserve funds. that the DAO is collected through token sales. So it's finance meets community and a new way for people to get things done as a group.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the cool crypto angle here, is that it's an organization that can have an underlying, crypto embedded within it, or it's in the treasury, whether it's Ether or a coin that you make yourself, or you could sell NFTs to raise money. What are some of the projects that you guys want to tackle first at Love DAO?
We are very open-minded. Once again, it's not really what do we want to tackle, but it's what does the community want to tackle. We're looking at a wide spectrum, from long COVID to chronic fatigue syndrome to depression, and you name it across the board. We're looking at herbs and plants, homeopathic solutions, repurposing existing approved drugs for other use cases. Yeah, we're kind of drinking from the fire hose right now, because we realize there's so many options out there that haven't been given any love by pharma, no pun intended. And we're just like, yeah, which one do we start with? It's like such a hard choice. Ultimately, it'll be the community who decides.
Is the community in the DAO, are they going to be participants in like the trials you're thinking, like, or the drug trials, or where does if I'm a DAO member of Love DAO, what am I doing? Like, can I be a part of like a clinical trial, or am I there to sort of like help run the DAO and raise funds and do stuff like that? Or is it both? Or
It's both. I mean, you're there, you can kind of choose your own adventure. That's the beauty of these communities. The main function as a community member is to participate in discussion, get other people on board, promote the DAO, help it raise funds. Those are kind of the basics. Then if you want to get involved in proposing things and writing proposals that you'd like the DAO to consider, that's another level. If you'd like to be an elected official that governs the DAO, reviews proposals, makes recommendations to the DAO, you'll work to build your reputation in the community enough to become an elected official.
are you issuing a coin to raise money for the treasury? Is that the idea?
Yes. I mean, we're not issuing it as Love Group. This DAO is going to be launched independently in a decentralized way, and tokens will be purchasable on a bonding curve. So anybody can go purchase the token at a price set by a bonding curve. The price goes up as as each incremental token is purchased. The price will go up.
How are you guys thinking about the securities laws with that sort of setup? Because as I understand it from what I've read, token holders would potentially benefit from any any revenue that you guys end up generating, like say from a therapy that's successful.
So in the beginning, we're just focusing on non-patentable, non-commercializable trials. So testing turmeric, testing vitamins, testing breath work. There's going to be no commercialization component, so it's purely an impact DAO, an impact token.
Okay.
Love the marketplace is a separate entity, separate company that's going to sell products, but that's completely different than the DAO itself. Now, in the future, there may be iterations of the DAO where there's revenue share back to the participants, but that is not a part of the launch, and that is in no way something we're definitely doing. It's just kind of in the exploration phase. It's purely a social impact DAO where people buy tokens because they want to see if some, plant or some natural way of living can treat a thing.
Another point here is I was telling a friend of mine about you and what was going on. She pointed out that patient costs are really expensive in drug trials. They can be like $50,000 per person. Is that something that you're going to be getting to at some point, or are you trying to maybe reimagine that as a process as well?
Listen, there's so much work to be done. Once again, drinking from the fire hose. So, yes, absolutely. I think there's so many ways we can bring down the cost of trials. There's decentralized clinical trials, which is a new thing. The first few decentralized trials have been done where patients don't have to show up to a facility but are logging their behaviors and their feedback on an app. That I think could bring down the cost considerably. So, in the beginning, we're probably going to do traditional clinical trials. We'll probably use another group that does the trials, and recruits patients locally. And members of the DAO could volunteer, but don't necessarily have to. Um, and eventually, I think there is so much opportunity for reinvention that we will be able to drive down cost and increase efficiency and all those great things.
One of the main promises, at least of crypto, is sort of targeting industries that are very heavy on the middleman. And I don't mean to come after pharma or medicine too much, but it does seem that it's incredibly centralized and it's incredibly driven by profits of if a drug company is going to put in millions of dollars in research and time and years, they obviously want to capitalize on that. But it does seem to me that why is that the only way? The only way. It seems like there should be alternate ways of going about this as well.
Absolutely. Once again, those businesses and those profit-seeking machines do great things. They create great technology. They fund important life-saving devices and drugs and therapies. But profits also skew incentives, right? Profits are not directly aligned with healing. And so, it's just like the big soft drink companies. I say there's nothing soft about a soft drink. So if you're the executive team and you're deciding to put more sugar or less, more sugar costs you nothing and is going to 2x your sales, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Going to put more sugar, right? And that sugar kills people, right? Um, there's not too much you can do because you have a fiduciary duty to shareholders to drive profits. You've just drove profits. The consumers are making their own choices for their own health. We have an uneducated consumer base who are making unhealthy choices. That's kind of the root problem of all of this that's going on. So same thing happens in pharma. If you have an addictive pill versus a non-addictive pill, you're going to choose the addictive one.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be able to charge more. I mean, that's why we have an opioid crisis in this country, is we're using addictive opioids when in other countries around the world, there are non-addictive alternatives that are being used. But the problem is those aren't patentable, and they don't make as much money.
Yeah.
With the good comes the bad. We need an alternative.
I think that's a great place to leave it, Ryan. Really fascinating talking to you, and best of luck with Love DAO. I think it's one of the more interesting use cases that I've heard of for a DAO. Yeah, again, thank you so much for your time and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Such a pleasure chatting, and we'll see you soon.
That's it for this episode of Decent People. Thanks so much for listening. Check the show notes for more information on our guests today. And make sure to look us up on the web at decential.io. That's DECENTIAL.io. And on Twitter at Decential. Have a great day.